ladies and gentlemen. It's now time for a special on-field ceremony. This evening, the Orioles are pleased to welcome the 6 finalists for the Boys and Girls Club of America's National Youth of the Year program. These outstanding teens are in the Washington, D.C. area to compete for the Boys and Girls Clubs of America's National Youth of the Year title, which includes a $50,000 scholarship. While in the area, they are being recognized by congressional leaders and high-profile corporate executives, and they will also meet with President Obama in the Oval Office. Fans, please join Orioles center fielder Adam Jones in congratulating this year's finalists. National Military Youth of the Year from Wiesbaden, Germany, Natalia Lynch. Midwest Youth of the Year from Benton Harbor, Michigan, Jasminique Newbern. Northeast Youth of the Year from Atlantic City, New Jersey, Sparkle Privard. Pacific Youth of the Year from Tacoma, Washington, Tay McKenzie. Southeast Youth of the Year from Orlando, Florida, Mariah Sullivan. And Southwest Youth of the Year from Dallas, Texas, Cecilia Garza. Once again, we welcome and congratulate our 6 finalists for the Boys and Girls Clubs of America's National Youth of the Year program, and we hope they enjoy tonight's game.